Hi, I'm your host, Melissa Hall, and today on The Ripple Effect, we're going to be talking about relationships with relationship expert Tanii Carr and author of the best-selling book, 10 Weeks to Love. So don't go anywhere.
What is the ripple effect? Every thought and every action has a reaction that is felt out in the universe.
There is only one art. That art is you.
On my show, I feature everyday people that are positively changing the lives of other people.
What I do and who I am made a difference in those people's life.
Just as a single drop of water sends ripples out into a pond, the actions of every individual are felt in the universe.
It only takes a split second to cause a ripple.
What ripples are you sending?
Welcome to The Ripple Effect. I am your host, Melissa Hall, and today my guest is author of the book, 10 Weeks to Love, Tanii Carr. Thank you for being here today.
It's a pleasure.
Tanii, tell me a little bit about this book and where the inspiration for this book came from.
Well, I've been a professional writer for over 40 years, but always writing for other people, press releases, articles, and various stories. This was my story, my journey, and I'll just tell you the real fast journey because it was pretty quick. I was 45 and I had been divorced for the second time, lost pretty much everything of a material nature in that divorce, left with only what I could put in my car. I lost my job. I was sleeping on a friend's couch. Not exactly how I planned on spending my later years.
Right.
Then after I got myself a job and found an apartment, I set about what turned out to be about a 10-week journey of self-discovery, transformation, which was a relatively short period of time, at the end of which I met Charlie, my now husband. He was 29. Now keep in mind, I was 45. He was 29. And as I said to him, I said, you know, if there had just been a 3 where that 2 was, I could have liked that a little bit better. So we decided, we got together on a Saturday, the 31st of January, 1987. We got married a month later, excuse me, and that was 30 years ago. I would tell people what I did because that 10 weeks was pretty profound. I learned a great deal about myself and about life in general. And so many people kept asking, why don't you write your story? Because I would share with them what I had done. And they were not only changing their personal relationships, but they were changing other relationships, including their professional relationships. So I finally said, well, that's it. I need to write this book. So I sat down and wrote the book. Now the book is broken up into two very basic areas. One is my story. What did I do during that 10-week period of time? And then at the end of each chapter is an exercise for the reader to do, to duplicate, hopefully with this similar results, what I did. I also have background in corporate training, and so I pretty much knew how to impart information in a way that other people could get more easily. So that was what the journey was for the book, and I've had a great time with it and loved writing it.
You know, there's so many questions just by virtue of what you've described. 10 weeks is not a long period of time for any kind of a transformation, but to go from divorced and I'm sure not feeling all that great about life, to finding your now husband of 30 years and the fact that he was 16 years younger than you.
Yes.
There's a lot of, I'm sure there's a lot of questions that you get asked all the time.
Absolutely.
But how did you know? Like, how did you know in that moment when you met him that this man was going to become
my future husband? This is the second most asked question that I get is, how did you know? Because when people hear that we got together that quickly, and I can liken it to particularly when you're a kid.
Right.
You will meet some kid in the neighborhood, some kid at school, and you kind of like click. There's this connection that you make where you're buds and you don't know a lot about each other, but you just suddenly, you instantly know, you make a connection.
Right.
The trick is to find that with a very personal relationship because we are so groomed into thinking that that's not possible. We're also not dealing on a more spiritual level. I have known forever that I was more than this flesh, that I was more than a piece of meat. I mean, I'm happy with myself the way I am, but I know that I am something else, something more than that. So when you make the connection, what are you making the connection with? You're making the connection with another person, another being, another spirit, by whatever name you want to call it. When Charlie and I got together, because this I think was really key to everything that I did, you know, we start off with certain filters, certain
absolutely.
assumptions.
Yes.
When you're a certain age, it's all over. You're not, you know, your chances of finding love are dwindling with every birthday. And, you know, it gets so depressing.
Right.
So we have all these filters that sort of give us permission to enjoy, to not enjoy what our life is going to be like. And I had spent that 10 weeks getting rid of those. And because if you have filters that are dictating what your life is going to be, the right person could be in front of you and you wouldn't see them because you don't believe that it's possible. You already have all the reasons telling you why it's impossible.
I agree with you.
So by that time, my husband and I on our separate journeys had gotten rid of all of that. So when we came together, I mean, we were driving in the car the first day, he helped me move a piece of furniture. That's all I needed the man to do. I said, he's strong, he lives close by, he will lift this chair from my garage into a truck for a garage
so it
sale.
all started over a piece of
furniture that I could not.
Incredible.
Just amazing. And so we spent the day together. He says, well, let me help you with the other end. Well, you know, lift this piece of furniture out of the truck. So as we're talking about everything. We're talking about life, everything that we think and feel about all of life's many areas. And at some point he looks at me and he says, and I was driving at the time, he looks over at me and he says, I love you. Now there was no lust. It wasn't a weird, like, ew. But I'm thinking to myself, who is this guy? Guys don't say things like that. Girlfriends do, but guys just don't say it with such friendliness, such warmth, and with no strings attached. And so truly, when we got together, it was one of those moments where you make a connection, and we knew within a few days. I said, oh my gosh, this is what we should do. And 3 weeks later got married, and as I say, here we are 30 years later, and he still thinks I'm eye candy. In 2 months, I'm going to be 75. For my husband to think that I am the most delicious creature on earth, I get emotional about it. Because he's the sweetest, the most amazing, he's brilliant, he's kind, and he's very much a man's man, and I'm just so fortunate. So anyway, that's how we knew. We got rid of the junk that was keeping us from just being with each other in the moment.
So why do you think at that particular point in your life, these filters were so easily stripped away? Because I walk around and I'm aware of the filters that people have, and even at times I do. And when I'm aware of them, I work very hard to remove them. But I notice it's almost like people default to them. And
Yes.
why is that?
I think that most of us are walking around kind of half awake and half asleep. I think that I wish more people were interested in pulling the strings when something doesn't make sense, to go, well, how come I did that? What did I do there? I don't think most people inspect. I think that they sort of take on wholesale what they're told, depending on who the people are they listen to. Sometimes it's your parents, sometimes it's friends, well-meaning aside, that they will make pronouncements to us. You should be this. They'll evaluate for us, basically. And to the degree that we buy all that, that's what creates those filters. One of the exercises I have in my book, I said, let's write down all the considerations that you have.
Yeah.
And then let's not have them run on automatic. Why don't you look at each one and say, where did that come from? Who said that?
Right.
What credentials does that person have? So we tend to not look. And I was raised to look. It doesn't always mean you'll find the answer, but first is you have to look at what you're thinking and evaluate it, even in that sense, where did it come from?
In your book and in conversations that we've had, you actually talk about embracing those moments when you get it wrong.
Yes.
And seeing that for the value that it truly is. Yes. But I think there's a second part to that.
Yes.
And learning to love yourself.
Yeah.
Wholeheartedly. The good and the bad.
That's right.
And see it as this collective accumulation of experience that gives you this opportunity to appreciate who you are and where you come from. So how did that discovery for you translate into this book? Because I think it's one thing to find it on your own, but how do you help people see the beauty in their failures?
This is a really important point. I've mentioned, I think I did a blog on it about the word responsibility is not a 4-letter word.
Yeah.
And usually when that word is used with us, it's because we've done something wrong. So it comes across like, you're responsible for that. It's never, you were responsible for that. Whoa, I am so thrilled. So the root of responsibility is respond. We've all had crap happen. I mean, there's not a person alive who hasn't had those moments, to a greater or lesser degree, of tragedy, of people dying, of loss, of catastrophe in their lives. Right. So the big question is not, we're never going to have a life that's just perfect and free of all that. And the truth is that there's a lot that we learn from those times. But it's how you respond to that. And I would cry myself to sleep at night after my husband and I split up and I'm living in somebody's boarding house, for goodness sakes, and not knowing what I'm going to do. I would cry myself to sleep at night. And then I'd say, wait a minute. The one thing I wanted to do was to run away from the hurt. I don't want to think about this because it's hurtful, right? And then I'm thinking, wait a second. If I can look at that, the lesson is not to run away. When you get a shot at the doctor, what do they tell you? Don't tense your muscles. Don't resist it. Relax. Be willing to relax. So I started to apply that concept to the hurt. Mm-hmm. And what I discovered was I started to feel immediately better about myself and could take responsibility for the fact that whether I agreed with my ex-husband's behavior or not, nobody made me walk in the room. Nobody made me stay with him for 7.5 years. It's not a compliment to me that I kept trying to make it right by changing myself for 7.5 years. So when I could start to face the reality, I started to actually not only feel better, but I actually got to a point where I became giddy about, I'm a very creative and talented person. And so I'm thinking, Tanii, not everybody could be so creative and messing up that badly. And I started to appreciate.
I want to talk more about this appreciation, but right now we're going to take a quick break, okay? Thank you for watching us. This is The Ripple Effect, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Be cool, just move with the groove. No funk in here, the beat way too slow. Let's just do what.
Welcome back to The Ripple Effect. I'm your host, Melissa Hull, and we are talking with Tanii Carr, the author of this amazing book, 10 Weeks to Love. So we ended the last segment with these epiphanal moments where you were discovering that these filters had really limited your ability to have the relationships that you wanted in life, but most importantly, the one that you needed to have with yourself.
Yes, absolutely. Over time, we sort of buy considerations from other people about ourselves.
Right.
It's particularly damaging when you're a kid because you depend upon your parents for your survival. So when a parent says negative things to you about yourself, we tend to look to them and go, well, I need to listen to them and there must be some truth in it. And then even later in life, we are hampered by those concepts, those filters. We drag them around with us, whether they're true or not, and we don't inspect them. This is the biggest problem.
I agree.
We don't look.
We accept them.
We accept them.
I love that you said we don't inspect them to find out if they're true or not,
That's
relevant
right.
or not,
That's
or even really applicable.
If they're applicable. So in the book, I wrote about what I did to handle that, but I also do some exercises where we break it down and say, okay, so I can't remember the exact wording, but basically, let's take a look at the considerations that you have about yourself in relationships. Are relationships any good to begin with? Are there age problems? All these different things. And with each one of those, I'm asking the reader to look at where did that idea come from? Who said it? When? And then reevaluating the merit of those opinions as they relate to the present. If they're irrelevant to the present and to creating the future that you want, get rid of them. You don't have to hold on to them. But the first thing to do is to actually identify what those considerations are, and then you can find out where did they come from, and you can inspect to see if it's relevant to yourself.
I love this because I see the value, and there's such wisdom in this. How willing do you think people are to really take a good, long, hard look at themselves and not judge it, not judge what they see, but learn to appreciate it? I mean, that's a big step for a lot of people because, like you were talking about, we've been kind of preconditioned to have certain viewpoints of ourselves or see ourselves through the eyes of those around us, those voices from our childhood, those bullies from grade school, you know, the boss who we could never please, the relationship that didn't go well. So what is that first like transformational step when you know that somebody is truly ready and to honestly assess who they are and learn to truly embrace themselves? What does that look like?
Well, I'll tell you what, it can look like different things, but generally there's a raise in your necessity level to look at that. Since I had pretty much lost everything, as I mentioned, of at least a material nature, and the fact of the matter is, you know, I've said that before and I should say that or should rephrase that, because I had also lost myself in the process.
Yeah.
But being kicked out of my own home, being suddenly having to, you know, depend upon the kindness of friends for a place to stay, that kind of, I mean, this is one of these, you know, you either survive it and learn from it or you don't. And I wasn't ready to give it up. I wasn't ready to give up the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So what were my choices? My choices were either to take a look, what the hell happened here? What did I do? Where can I go from here? So there was definitely an urgency. I remember I was driving down the Ventura Freeway at part of my journey. I was working and all that. I'm driving home and I'm screaming at myself in the car. And I'm like, damn it, this needs to stop. I'm tired of going home and being the only person in charge of my life. And I was so mad. But I had gotten to that point where I was just, that's it.
Yeah.
And I made a decision. There's a great quote from the second Himalayan expedition, I forget the name of the explorer, that I also have in the book, that has to do with once you commit to something, 110%, all kinds of magical things happen. And I know that you have reality on this. And I hope many of your viewers will. You make a commitment, and things which never would have come your way before you made that 100% commitment suddenly appear in your life to facilitate that decision that you made wholeheartedly. And this was one of those moments for me where I was sick and tired of, I said, that's it, I have to improve this situation. And so for me, it looked like a necessity level, you know, and I was very blessed with good friends who would listen to me, who would help me through this journey by listening to me and understanding it and also letting me solve the problem. Here's another big thing that I discovered. When we in our lives come to depend on other people to solve our problems, whether it's parents or friends or a relationship or a boss, when we are not allowed to solve our own problems, we become less capable of solving our problems.
I absolutely have seen this play out in so many different areas of my own personal life with, you know, a younger sister that has struggled with drug addiction. And thankfully, she's on her way out of that. But even now, she really looks for people to save her because she doesn't know how to, has no idea how to be accountable and have ambition. That's the one thing. She has no ambition because I don't think she's ever been made to have to figure it out, work through the problem. She's so used to being saved that now it's actually debilitating. I think it's a debilitating thing that was started off well-meaning, but now has turned into this very difficult dynamic in her life. And, you know, I think that people don't understand that failure is a beautiful blessing because of what it reveals about you and your character and also the wisdom of life what we learn through those moments where we're not getting it right. And I know that you really understand this, and you've spoken to me about how you learn to just love the fact that you can mess something up so good.
Yes, absolutely. And also to, something else that we've talked about briefly is this notion of making people right enough to change. When somebody constantly makes you wrong, it has a terrible effect on you. You start to feel that you're incapable, because then you end up defending why you were right about something.
You know what? This is really interesting, because I agree with you. I think that oftentimes people get stuck in this cyclical kind of argument where it continues to come up, and I really believe it's because people they're waiting to make a comment rather than listening to the other person. But I also think that sometimes people need to say something until they feel heard.
Yes.
And
Very
you
important.
had talked about this in the pre-interview.
Yes.
And I would love for you just to kind of give me your viewpoint on it, because I thought it was so remarkable.
Absolutely. It's a simple concept. What we talk about, we certainly hear from so many sources. You have to learn you have to listen.
Yeah.
But listening isn't just one thing. When you're communicating with somebody, first of all, it'd be nice to see that somebody's actually there, ready to receive your communication, instead of like, okay, yeah, really, you said something. So there are different aspects of communication, but one of those that is so often forgotten is to acknowledge that you heard what the guy said, and to genuinely understand what he said. Now, one of the things that you and I talked about was, I think this is so misunderstood. Because you acknowledge that you understood what somebody said doesn't mean that you're in agreement with it. Those are two completely different things. We find ourselves talking and waiting for somebody to go, oh, I heard you. Or words to that effect. I got it. I understand. Wow, I understand.
Right.
And until that happens, the tendency is to, I'm going to say it again, until somebody finally goes, oh, that's what you meant. And that has to be part of it. And part of that, and I've written about it, and I've certainly talked with people about it, is that you need to create a safe environment so that person can communicate to you forthright. I'll give you an example. My husband and I remember I came home one day. My husband he's brilliant at so many things, but he just happens to be a Renaissance kind of guy. I came home, and he was working on the computer, because he does very sophisticated software development. And he was in tears. And I'm like, what happened? I'm thinking somebody must have died. And he said, I lost some photographs. Now, my husband is a photographer as well as being just brilliant with computer work. And I knew, I didn't even have to ask, I knew that he had already tried everything to recover those photographs, because it was in my phone, and he lost all these digital photographs. And I knew there was absolutely nothing that could be done about it. If there was anything to be done about it, he would have done it already, because technically he knew what he was doing. So I never made him wrong. I never even got angry. And it wasn't like I had to think about, don't get angry. I simply knew that what was the point. So I said, just talk to me and tell me what happened, and let him go through the process and sort of get some relief by reliving what had happened. Where did it fail? Where did he make a mistake? And in doing that, and he's done the same for me. Please let it be known, this is not a one-way deal with Charlie and me by any means. So by doing that, and I've done that with other people when it was difficult subjects and somebody was angry, and you never want to fight with somebody who's angry, because it's more about, I want you to hear me, or I'm making sure that you think I'm right, and all this stuff. So by listening and really duplicating and really understanding what he had to say and making it safe enough for him to be completely honest without fear of retribution. Oh, that's what happened, you know, and verbal thrashing. So that is an incredibly helpful thing. I think if your viewers would just do that one thing, if they would listen to somebody who's clearly in some kind of emotional distress or pain, let them communicate freely and acknowledge what they said before then giving their viewpoint. If it happens to be a different viewpoint, at least let that person know that you heard them, you really, really understand them.
Tanii Carr, relationship expert and author of this very useful and insightful book, 10 Weeks to Love. How can people find this book, Tanii?
This is available on Amazon, the go-to place for buying things. And just look it up under 10 Weeks to Love or my name, Tanii Carr.
And that's TANII
Yes.
CARR.
Yes.
So it has been an absolute delight having you here today on The Ripple Effect. And I thank you so much for all of the
A real pleasure.
wisdom. Yes, absolutely. And I want to thank you for watching. This has been The Ripple Effect. I'm your host, Melissa Hull, and we'll see you next week.